Big announcement on Wednesday having to do with tax reform. The process has begun long ago, but it really formally begins on Wednesday. So go do it. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, I think that's called let's get bigly with it, because when the president indicated that it was coming and that it wouldn't be delayed, at least his part, a plan out of the White House, the markets like that. The markets, of course, have been waiting for this for some time. Down today, up on the week, and if our Charlie Gasparino is right, looking for something more than just marginal. What are you hearing, Charlie?
Here's what we're hearing simply is that next week they're going to have some, or at least the president suggests they're going to have some tax cut proposal that's going to be unveiled. Now, we should point out, Neil, this comes after 2 weeks of incredible pressure by conservative pundits, by Phil Gramm, the former senator, supply sider, tax cutter from Texas,
right,
on the need now to cut marginal tax rates on individuals and get a decent corporate tax rate cut, and that a criticism of the Trump administration on delaying that. Now, on top of their criticisms, as you know, markets have been up nice since President Trump was elected. But if you look at the markets since March 1, around the time when you interviewed Steve Mnuchin, and he set an August deadline for a pretty comprehensive tax cut plan, markets have been down since then. And the reason why, quite simply, is an indecision on the part of the Trump administration as to the size, scope, and the timing of the tax cut. Now, what was fascinating about today is we have the president coming out saying, citing a Wednesday deadline to come up with some sort of plan or proposal. Then the White House, right after that, came out and said, nah, maybe not Wednesday. He's just, we don't know exactly what he means by that.
Right.
And then the president coming out again saying, yeah, it's probably Wednesday. So I will tell you, if you look at the markets on those statements, the market's been whipsawing on that. The uncertainty, I will tell you, about this thing is not being treated very favorably by sophisticated investors. And I guess they would like the White House to speak with one voice on this, and kind of a coherent voice at that.
And one of the things, too, is, and this was rather telling, when the president was saying, look, I know there's this other stuff out there, and everyone's kind of fixated on what we do in 100 days. That magic moment comes next weekend. But that he was saying, look, we're going to do this, and don't get bogged down in the health care thing. I want you to react to this.
You're going to do health care and tax reform?
It'll happen. We'll see what happens. No particular rush, but we'll see what happens. But healthcare is coming along well. The government is coming along really well. A lot of good things are happening. Thank you, folks.
You're going to get a healthcare bill next week?
Don't know. Doesn't matter if it's next week. Next week doesn't matter.
Next week doesn't matter. Now, he was walking with Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. Those two buildings, the White House and the Treasury, are next door to each other, so that's why it's a relatively easy thing to do.
Right.
But what did you make of that? That he seems to be saying, yeah, I'm still going full steam ahead on a revamp of health care. Right. I think I'm getting more support than I used to get. I'm paraphrasing this sentiment that's building in the White House, that they've got maybe more votes than they had last time for a rework. But again, they could be losing moderates. We don't know, so why jump and
right,
make those guesses? But on the health care thing versus the tax thing, he seems to be telegraphing, I'm going to do this dual track approach here. What do you make of that?
Well, remember, they've been saying forever that, or since this whole process began, that they needed to do health care first before they do tax cuts, because there was some implied savings in the health care. The CBO would see the savings in the health care reform, and thus they'd be able to plow that into the tax cuts. You and I have been talking, listen, just do the tax cuts. The economy's calling for it. Stop being such a green eye shade. And it looks like the president is now saying that they're going to do the tax cuts first, and that health care, if it comes along, it comes along. If it doesn't, we're not going to push the timing. That we're going full speed on tax cuts. So, listen,
that's unusual in of itself, and I'll get into this with a key member of the House Ways and Means Committee. But this notion that you needed whatever the revenue base from a healthcare overhaul to proceed with that, he seems to be intimating maybe not.
He's backing off that. Now, it's interesting what came before him backing off that, and it was two columns. One in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, and one in the New York Times. The New York Times, I believe, was written by Steve Moore and Arthur Laffer and Larry Kudlow, all supply-side economists. The Wall Street Journal was written by Phil Gramm, the former supply-side senator from Texas, and they both came out and said, listen, you are blowing an historic opportunity to cut taxes and to return money back to the American people and to get this economy, which has grown at less than 2% under the Obama years, to get it growing like it should grow so wages go up. And I think that may have hit home with Donald Trump.
All right, my friend, thank you very much. Great reporting, as always. Charlie Gasparino. All right, so the news here, folks, is that the president is going to go full steam ahead next Wednesday, where they'll outline their plan, that is the White House blueprint, for a big old tax cut. He says bigger than anything we have seen. That would mean bigger than anything we've gotten in the past, the last go-around with, of course, the Ronald Reagan tax cuts a generation ago. Illinois Republican Congressman Peter Roskam joining us. He is a crucial member of that very crucial committee, House Ways and Means, where they've been working on this for some time now anyway. Very good to have you, Congressman. It sounds that the president wants to go through with an offer plan of his own next Wednesday. Is that being coordinated with you guys?
Well, this is welcome news. We've been waiting for a long time for the White House, Neil. As you know, the House has a blueprint. It's a plan that we embrace and we enjoy and we think is a good proposal.
Is it your plan? Is it roughly the same, 7 rates to 3, a cut in the corporate tax, et cetera?
I think there's going to be elements of this. But look, your guess is as good as mine, which is why this is news. When the president's coming out now and saying that they're going to have a dramatic tax cut, I think that's music to people's ears. So here's what we've got to sort out. Will it be as dramatic
as yours? Do you want it to be as dramatic as yours? You're going to cut all the rates, bring it down to 3. You're going to take the top rate, bring it down to 33%, the corporate rate presumably down to 20%, maybe lower. Are you all roughly in agreement on those broad parameters that you know?
I haven't seen the president's plan, so I can't speak to that directly. We also want to get small business, that is pass-throughs, their business income down to 25%. But look, I think that in the great scheme of things, this is a good move forward. We've now got the White House that's taking the initiative, communicating in some ways a date certain here, and now we can get about this great debate. We know what we think, or we've got a plan in the House. We need to hear from the White House. Senate's got to engage at some point on this, but here's what we know. We can't stay here. And the notion of taking advantage of what is really a national inflection point on taxes, I think it's where the action is. So let's move. Let's start.
All right, but are you supportive of moving, even if you don't get a health care rework done?
Look, I would divorce the two, and I wouldn't let healthcare hold up the progress on tax reform. My preference is drop the current healthcare bill, take a running start at it, and say we're not gonna be limited to an arbitrary deadline. An arbitrary deadline does what for you? It does nothing.
Do you know if your chairman, Kevin Brady, feels the same way, Congressman, that look, if you're going nowhere on the healthcare front, even though it's looking a little more promising last go around, go full steam ahead on this?
Oh, I don't want to speak for the chairman because I haven't spoken to him directly about the timing. But I do know this. He's interested in moving forward on tax reform, and I think an overwhelming majority of folks are. I mean, look, this is where there is a national consensus in this sense. Nobody is defending the status quo of the tax code. Nobody likes it. So since that is true, let's take advantage of that and let's drive a growth agenda. And so I think it's good news that the White House is coming out and saying we've looked at all these things and we're going to be articulating our plan. Great.
Next Wednesday. So let me ask you this then, Congressman, is with these supply-siders, the Art Laffers and the others, very big proponents of big tax cuts because they say that is the only kind of stimulus game in town. They've also said don't get so worked up about whether they're revenue neutral in the beginning. In other words, that they're paid for in the beginning because they'll pay for themselves later on. Do you subscribe to that view yourself? Do you believe that?
Well, here's part of here's part of the thing that we've got to think through. Number one, do they pay for themselves in the long run? And I'm talking to you from the state of Illinois, which is no stranger to you in terms of fiscal disaster and avoidance behavior as it relates to debt. So set that question aside for a second. The other question is, do we want permanent tax policy, or do we just want a tax policy that's going to expire in 10 years? And if we're trying to influence business behavior, which we are, if we want to have a manufacturing renaissance, which we do, if we want people to reshore their corporate interests here in the United States, do we really think they're going to do that on a tax code that expires in 10 years? So I'd say let's not start out at the notion of throwing the towel in on revenue neutrality or having this pay for itself. we can have this pay for itself. We can have growth. We can deal with the tax base, the erosion of the tax base, and we can have a permanent tax code. So
but you'd have to give on something, right? You'd have to do something, either scale back some tax breaks that are popular today, like for state local taxes. Would you be open to that?
Look, so the blueprint puts the House blueprint puts a lot of those sacred cows on the table, and final decisions, such as state and local, for example,
such as charitable deductions.
No, not charitable. That's too.
What
sacred.
about mortgage interest? Mortgage interest
too
taxes.
Sacred. Right. So there's some, but not others. And I take your point. You've got to dial these things up or dial them back. But here's what I think we should be doing as a threshold issue, Neil. We ought not be walking away from pushing for a permanent tax code. We've got American fiscal and tax policy is inverted right now. We have temporary tax policy and we have